Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.
We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. St. Louis's Grove neighborhood has changed a lot in recent years. New residents and new businesses are moving in. It's on the upswing. There's an obvious pattern of gentrification. While neighborhood improvement is a good thing, there can also be a human cost. Our We Live Here team takes a look in its most recent podcast. Reporter-producer Tim Lloyd and contributor Chad Davis, our race and culture fellow, sat down with me yesterday to discuss what's going on in the Grove. Tim began with an overview.
Well, I think anybody who drives through that part of the city has seen changes in the last few years. Big apartment complexes popping up, new really exciting businesses along Manchester. But also, there's been some changes too. As that development has come in, a lot of longtime residents ultimately get priced out of an area. And often this trend is called gentrification. And I think that there's a kind of truth that you can get to when you just step back and listen to people who are living in that environment. Mm-hmm. And I think with this particular episode, what we wanted to do is step back, collect some stories, and ultimately, I think, assemble a bit of a mosaic, if you will, to collectively get at what that larger experience is in that part of the city, especially as it undergoes some pretty significant changes.
And Chad, you were the collector of many of those stories.
All of them, actually.
Well, all of them.
Yeah.
The contributing editor of for We Live Here. What are some of the things that struck you about what you were hearing?
Yeah, it was really interesting. There were so many different perspectives, I feel, from the people who live and or work in the Grove. On one case, you had several businesses and business owners who they got into the Grove because, it was an up-and-coming neighborhood and the price of rent was affordable. And so, they got into the Grove for that reason. But then on the other hand, you also had people who were living in the Grove and have lived there for such a long amount of time. And then some of their accounts were, some had to or one individual had to move out because, it was getting too much after the death of her husband. And then also you had other individuals who noticed just like all of the different businesses and the cost of going to restaurants and shopping were just increasing. So you had a lot of different perspectives from that neighborhood that I thought were very interesting.
Well, they say that a rising tide is supposed to lift all boats. I'm getting the impression that that's not necessarily the case in this gentrification process.
Yeah, it was just not everyone I feel like is feeling the same ways that one might expect. There were just so many different experiences, and you had some individuals who really who liked living in the Grove, especially like newer residents, and they felt that it was an up-and-coming neighborhood, and they went to the neighborhood because of the diversity in that area. But then individuals also noticed, okay, well, there are some consequences as well to how this neighborhood is changing.
Mm-hmm. Tim, it seems to me, hearing what's going on in other parts of the country and what you're reporting on in the Grove, that gentrification is getting kind of a bad name.
Well, I think that depends on who's doing the talking.
Yeah.
I think that I have yet to really speak with anyone in an area that's experiencing significant development who has lived there for a long time, who says, I just don't want any development here. I don't want any new stuff. No, people want places to go shop for groceries and get the things that they need just to live their lives, and transportation too. But there's a sort of a disconnect that happens where that money flows in. Longtime residents who are in a lot of the areas that are labeled gentrified a lot of the time the longtime residents are people of color, and we don't need to go into all the history there.
No.
And so what you get is this sort of situation where people who have lived there for a long time and have maintained a neighborhood, maintained a fabric of a neighborhood, the moment that development comes in, get priced out. So if you can imagine someone who's living, let's say, on a fixed income, and their mortgage payment is set at X, but then as property values go up, property taxes go up, and they get priced out ultimately of a neighborhood that they've lived in and held together. So, I mean, I think there's sort of, sort of the internal title that we gave this episode was My Messy Neighborhood. And I think it's nuanced, and I think we tried to get at that too, where oftentimes people will welcome the development, but they want the development to be fair for people who already live there. And that is where the disconnect happens.
So, Chad, the Grove is getting whiter.
Yeah, I guess, but frankly, it's kind of what's happening. And it also seems to be getting younger as well. I think we're seeing, a lot of African Americans who have lived there for a while. It's becoming difficult, as far as like Tim said, when it comes to pricing, and then the displacement kind of happens, as a result of that, and then you get a younger, whiter crowd typically that does come in instead.
Where are the people who are being squeezed out? And that's my term. You may have used it in the piece, I'm not sure, but where are they going?
One individual I spoke with, she actually went to a retirement facility in South City, and for her, after the death of her husband, it was a little difficult for her to even take care of her home. So she moved into an area, South City Retirement Center. Other individuals, it kind of, varies, I feel like. I think it's really, wherever the most affordable housing, for them can be is really where they tend to end up.
And this is the kind of thing, Tim, that you and Camille have been looking at. This creates the kind of conditions that you've been reporting on.
Yeah, I mean, all this stuff is connected. I mean, we've spent a year taking apart housing and equity and race and class in St. Louis. And yeah, I mean, all these trends are sort of deeply woven together. And I think that there is a growing interest in trying to address housing issues in St. Louis. I think one thing that sticks out to me, too, when we talk about this particular topic from this season is this notion that often St. Louis is promoted as this incredibly affordable place to live. And that can be true, I think, for a lot of middle-income folks, but not for everyone. This can be an incredibly expensive place to live, and in an older city where often building conditions haven't necessarily been maintained, like St. Louis, in the more affordable parts of town, just finding suitable, affordable housing can be incredibly challenging. And so that when you have situations where people are in neighborhoods where they've lived for a long time, they've built equity in their home, which is a huge way generational wealth is, of course, handed down. When that gets taken away and then you're put into a situation where you can't necessarily find adequate affordable housing, let alone affordable housing next to transit, you can see how these things start to build up over time.
What about the politics of it? Are there politicians involved or not getting involved because they see the values going up?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really get into sort of intentionally sort of sidestep the politics of it. We just wanted to know the lived experience. I think that oftentimes when we, and by we, I mean frankly, the news media go into these type of topics, that's where we start. Well, what do the politicians have to say? And I think we wanted to flip the script a little bit and say, like, what do the people who are experiencing these changes, for better or for worse, have to say? And we didn't really spend much time, talking about politics or politicians in this particular episode.
Is there any kind of neighborhood involvement in terms of trying to stem the tide, if you will?
Yeah, there are a few things in the Grove, or a few programs and places that are trying to, work to, achieve, I feel like, an area where it's more affordable and very accepting. So, I mean, I spoke with this one group of people. They're called the Midtown Mamas. They're from the Midtown. It's a Midtown center, actually, in the Grove. And really what they do is they work at the community garden. They go on field trips. They try to kind of, they try to help with the neighborhood. I know they work with City Greens, which is another program for getting groceries and such. So they're trying to, work there and trying to make that affordable and available for individuals. There's also a church there called St. Cronin, and I actually spoke to the retired pastor there, and he has done a lot of reaching out to individuals in the Grove, and he actually helped out with Midtown Community Services. And for his birthday, he actually, or not birthday, I'm sorry, 50th anniversary as a priest, raised around $125,000 or $150,000 a few years ago to put that into the building and put that into services to actually help out with the community. So there's a lot of just like, I feel like grassroots, just like involvement and development in the Grove, which was to me really interesting reporting on and finding out about.
Well, who comprises the grassroots group? Is it newcomers or the people who have been there for a while?
I think, kind of looking from just like the people that I spoke with, it seemed like a lot of the individuals were people who have been there for a while. Like the Midtown Mamas, a lot of them, they started going to the program in like the 90s, which is when Midtown Mamas started. But a lot of them were from the area. They might have moved in from like the 60s or 70s. The priest, I want to say he started in the 2000s as far as preaching in that area. And so a lot of the individuals there who are helping to, trying to keep individuals there. They have been there for a long time and been there for a while. But then you do have newer people. Like there was one woman I spoke with. She was a newer resident. She also was kind of aware of the changes that are being made in the neighborhood. And she's 25 years old. She's white, but she understands kind of gentrification and how the neighborhood's changing. And so, she also is kind of looking at ways to try to make sure that, it is fair and affordable for everyone who's there.
Tim, what do you think has to happen to make this a fairer and more balanced kind of a situation?
Well, there's a concept that's out there, and it hasn't really, to the best of my knowledge, really taken hold here in St. Louis, but it's called a Community Benefits Agreement. It goes by CBA for short. And essentially what it is an agreement between a sort of a neighborhood entity and developers that long and short of it is try to mitigate the negative effects of that development can have on residents in an area that's being developed. So, and that can include everything from workforce development to different kind of social services funding. And I think for people who are really concerned with trying to make sure that development doesn't steer its way into gentrification, a CBA is sort of a tool that is popping up on a lot of people's radar.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think it goes from here, Chad?
I think really I think it still kind of stays with, grassroots organizing and just, getting people in the neighborhood involved in order to actually make the area, make sure it's welcoming for everybody. I think once that happens, once you have people young and old from the neighborhood, aware of the different changes and aware of the positive and negative consequences that can happen, I think just learning from that and then just making sure that everyone is on that same level and working to make sure that, it is fair is the first step. And I think that's where it go.
It occurs to me that what may be missing in all of this is some sense of planning. I mean, you get in a community like this that all of a sudden sort of spontaneously begins on the upswing, if you will, to become gentrified. But it's like Manchester Road when you drive out west. Mm-hmm. I don't know who the planners were that decided to put all the fast food places there. They didn't think ahead, in places like that.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though, and I think that sometimes this gets missed when we talk about this sort of grouping of topics in St. Louis, is that whether you call it gentrification or urban development, whatever the label you put on it, it's not happening nearly at the pace that it's happening in a place like Chicago, certainly not like New York or D.C. And in a way, it positions St. Louis to sort of be in front of the game when it comes to figuring out how do you do this fairly, because it's not happening at the rate. So and again, I think back to sort of what we were talking about earlier about the rising awareness around these type of development issues and community benefits agreements and all that kind of stuff. I think that there's a rising tide of interest. It's a question, I think, that we'll see what happens, where how far it gets in a place like St. Louis, where it's not, where oftentimes when gentrification happens in a major city, it happens so fast you can't really stop it.
Well, Chad, you grew up in St. Louis. You know the change here doesn't happen quickly.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I agree with Tim. It is like a slower change and a slower shift. Just from being here, you can definitely see that in different neighborhoods, especially more urban neighborhoods here.
Well, gentlemen, let's leave it at that and give folks the opportunity to listen to the latest podcast. Tim, where can they get that podcast?
Oh, I don't know, Don. Let's see. Anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm just trying to make that interesting every time now.
And it is, without fail. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Thank you.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.